See, now to me, that button's in the worst possible spot. The second button literally makes or breaks the shirt. Look at it. It's too high. It's in no man's land. You look like you live with your mother.
There are two types of people. People who like the Seinfeld series finale, and big stupids. I'm sorry, no, that isn't fair. Big media literate stupids. You're up! This is a joke, mostly. My best friend who put me on to Seinfeld hates the ending, so I assure you I am mostly speaking in jest.
It's like it's just a show ending. It doesn't go on the front page of the New York Times.
Since the defining 90s sitcom concluded over 20 years ago, that ending has been one of the most divisive series finales in pop culture.
What are you doing, lady? Want to go to the movies?
I've been to the movies.
Not this movie.
They're all the same.
Seinfeld is a sitcom following four friends. Comedian Jerry Seinfeld, played by comedian Jerry Seinfeld.
Do you know what this is all about? Do you know why we're here? To be out. This is out.
So, how about that airline food?
His best friend and general misfit, George Costanza.
George, watch out for those pigeons.
Oh, they'll get out of the way. You really smell banana?
His former girlfriend, now good friend, Elaine Bennis.
Why'd you have a fake?
Of course, on occasion.
And the guy never knows? How can he not know that?
You didn't know.
I think I'll have a piece of cake.
And his neighbor, the absolute force of nature, Cosmo Kramer.
It's a good cigar.
These four are scum.
Oh my god!
So, where are we eating?
They are four of the most petty, superficial, manipulative set of New York white people you've ever seen.
Hey, an original G.I. Joe.
Jerry, what are you doing?
I'm putting this on him and
Jerry? You're priceless.
I just want to touch him a little.
I said no. Can you just get me an aspirin?
Will not cause drowsiness. May cause drowsiness.
But the show is very aware of this. A standard episode of Seinfeld follows each of them find themselves in some minor inconvenience,
It's the Puerto Rican Day Parade.
They never let anyone through.
usually one created by themselves, prompting them to find the most elaborate way to get around said issue, which inevitably blows up in their face in the end.
Why are they so picky? And then the actors would read it, and it would be funny, and I would laugh, and I would say, okay.
This formula saw Seinfeld rise to the top of 90s American television.
It was a show about nothing. I mean, most TV is about nothing. At least this show was honest about it.
And it's now considered a turning point in the sitcom formula.
If you watch that, and then you think of what the sitcom was before we came along, that to me is one of my favorite things that really shows the kind of outlandish excitement that we brought to it.
Often called an anti-sitcom. It's a show about nothing. The characters are static. No hugging, no learning was the rule that series co-creator Larry David mandated.
This is Denise, by the way. Ted?
Yeah.
Jerry and Larry didn't necessarily set out to subvert the traditional sitcom formula, but that was what their observational, anti-society humor led them to.
Did you just double dip that chip? Excuse me? You dipped the chip, you took a bite, and you dipped again.
So naturally, with this approach, after the show had run for 9 good years and Jerry grew sick of it, they weren't about to dish out the usual sitcom ending, were they?
Lasted how long?
9 years, 180 episodes.
You gave it up, right?
I did, sir.
They didn't cancel you. You canceled them.
You're not aware of this?
A show about nothing. It's getting quite a farewell.
You think I got canceled? Are you under the impression that I got canceled?
Have I hurt you, Jerry?
Is Elaine and Jerry getting together? Was Jerry and George going to move out to California? I don't know what they had.
I thought that was pretty well documented. Is this still CNN?
Don't most shows go down a little?
Most people do also.
Jerry and George, who've been in negotiations to start their own sitcom, have finally had their show greenlit and are set to move to California.
We'll all go somewhere, the four of us.
Before going there, the network sends them on an exclusive trip to go wherever they want in a private jet.
This is all very exciting.
I'm sorry, I have to say I'm a little disappointed.
Due to ridiculousness, there's an accident.
I'm gonna die! Jerry, I'm always...
Hey.
And they have to stop in a small town in Massachusetts to fix the plane.
Out of the car!
On the side of the road, they witness a mugging, but instead of helping the man being mugged, they stand there to laugh and fat shame him.
See, the great thing about robbing a fat guy is that they can't really chase you.
The restaurant that was the backdrop hosted one of the city's biggest bashes in honor of the show's farewell.
It's actually doing them a favor. It's less money for them to buy food.
In Times Square, an awesome sight as hundreds of fans stood outside to watch the final episode on one of the world's largest television sets.
Come on! Come on, come on!
That's a shame.
Due to what is described as a Good Samaritan law, the gang gets arrested.
Good Samaritan law. You don't have to help anybody. That's what this country's all about.
What's the charge? Being a bunch of jerks.
I want you to find out everything you can about these people, and I mean everything.
Seinfeld made millions of people laugh for nearly a decade. Its loyal fans made it one of television's most popular shows ever.
I guess we could have called for help.
But then we would have missed the whole thing.
This two-part special watches various characters we've seen throughout the series make cameos to testify to how these four rapscallions screwed them over.
They have quite a record of mocking and maligning. This is a history of selfishness, self-absorption,
You've come a long way to be
immaturity.
here today, haven't you?
But they did not care. All they do is mock me, just like they did the fat fellow. All the time, mocking, mocking. Send them all away, lock them up forever. They're not human.
The series then ends with the four being found guilty.
I do not know how the four of you found each other, but your utter disregard for everything that is good and decent has wrought the very foundation upon which our society is built. I can think of nothing more fitting than for the four of you to spend a year removed from society.
All of their dreams being dashed, leaving them sitting down in their cell,
See, now to me, that button is in the worst possible spot.
repeating the same meaningless
Really?
jokes that
Oh,
we
yeah.
started the series
The
with.
second button is
The
the
second
key button. Literally makes or breaks the shirt. Look at it. Look at it. It's too high. It's in no man's land. You look like you live with your mother.
Haven't we had this conversation before?
You think?
I think we have.
Yeah, maybe we have.
Punishing the audience for laughing along. As you can imagine, said audience who had been anticipating the end to the #1 hit TV show of all time didn't quite take too kindly to that little slap in the face of a finale. But were they wrong? I've never been married to happy endings, not in the things I make, not in the things I watch. Much to my mother's dismay, whenever I come up with a film for family movie night, someone might die, or get their heart broken. Not that it's a choice, but it just tends to work out that way. I've never really given too much thought to endings in terms of happiness or sadness. Wherever the story logically concludes, it concludes. That was until I had people starting to listen to me. If you're one of the people who reads my amateur webcomic The New Butler, you may notice that while I like humor, the story arcs invariably end in tragedy. It's a satirical comic set in England about a strange little man who works for rich white people. I'm a black Jamaican, probably a middle class guy, who is left leading politics. There's gonna be a certain edge to these stories. Sure, they may be played for laughs, but due to the commentary I'm trying to make, the endings are usually more than a bit cynical. However, as I get more eyeballs on me, particularly here, more and more people tell me that they really think about the things I say, I must admit I felt a compulsion to leave them with more hope than maybe I have myself. The truth of it is, while I do whatever I can to create a world that I want to see, I'm definitely a big pessimist, which may have manifested in the ways that my stories and essays go, as well as those that I'm attracted to. This has compelled me to think deeper about endings, and the places and ultimate takeaways that they leave on audiences.
Art is a lie that makes us realize the truth.
For a century, the Mouse people have made a tradition of taking the bleakest of children's stories only to trim their thorns and tie them up with pretty pink bows. Like many people my age and older, I grew up with these worlds of pixie dust and wishing wells, but it was always a poorly kept secret that the original stories were more than a bit darker. Shameful as it is to admit now, there was once a time when my greatest creative inspiration was Walter Disney. Don't cancel me, I was tiny, I didn't know better, but Mr. Disney and his films quite literally birthed my love of art and storytelling. Today, that company represents just about everything I hate, but let's not get distracted. I took it upon myself to explore the classics. Disney set out to create a world of fantasy for young children, giving them a future to look up to, people to aspire to be, legacies to carry. When you're watching a Disney movie as a little girl, you are a princess. As a young boy, you're a prince, or you're that boy who retains his innocence forever. It's a world where dreams can come true, just so long as you wish upon a star and believe in yourself.
Pack of lies.
And I was one of these children, full of innocence and optimism, maybe more than a bit naive, but afterwards, inevitably, adolescence struck. Oh God. While I had been raised with Disney's bright, bubbly reimaginings of Hans Andersen, tales of Ariel the Little Mermaid, and Elsa the Snow Queen, over the years I've taken more to Powell and Pressburger's bleak, existentialist interpretation of the Red Shoes. So I did the thing and explored the original stories, and it's actually not at all shocking how different they are, but it is telling. Disney's The Little Mermaid and the original story hold entirely different messages. Hans Christian Andersen was a deeply troubled man. Hopeless but unsuccessful romantic plagued by religious guilt and a massive ego. Almost definitely would get diagnosed with something had he lived today. But the original story of The Little Mermaid moved me. Both the Disney picture and the original story follow a mermaid princess who longs to see what lies above the surface.
Don't see how a world that makes such wonderful things could be bad.
Making a deal with a sea witch to get legs in exchange for her voice. Of course, in the original version, she gets her tongue cut off. She falls for a prince, but the interesting place where these stories diverge is in that ending. In the Disney version, she and the prince fall for each other, but the sea witch, Ursula, disguises herself as a pretty girl, uses Ariel's voice to trick the prince, and they become engaged to be married.
We're almost there.
Ariel and her band of sea creatures must then thwart her plans. After an epic boss fight, Ursula gets defeated, and Ariel and the prince get married. Brilliant. However, Andersen's version is less bombastic. The Little Mermaid, having only really seen the prince once before making her deal, finds out that the prince is already engaged. But after seeing the two together, she realizes that she simply cannot, should not, break them apart. But now, in accordance to the witch's deal, she must either kill the prince or die herself. She takes the dagger ready to do him in when he's asleep, but can't. She jumps overboard, turning into foam. Her soul is then taken into the heavens, joining other mermaid souls as a daughter of the air, essentially turning into a breeze, providing a cooling breeze to warmer parts of the world. It's a tragedy, yes, but it's kind of beautiful. The Disney movie changes its ending to be one far more exciting and adventurous, with twists and drama where the protagonists achieve their dreams and live happily ever after in marriage.
Hi everybody, I'm Geraldo Rivera. Tonight we'll be talking about the controversial Good Samaritan trial. What's the mood? What's going on tonight?
There also seems to be some friction between Mr. Seinfeld and Ms. Binnis. The rumor is that they once dated.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, who knows? Maybe this trial will bring them closer together. Maybe they'll even end up getting married.
But the original story is something else entirely. It's dark, it's blunt, but it's still rewarding. The mermaid may not get what she wants, but she serves a larger purpose. She adds something into the world. She sacrifices her own happiness for the prince's, and while she loses her body and all the pleasure she may have enjoyed had she stayed in her kingdom or gone ahead with worming her way into this young man's life, she does offer the world a service. It's a very religious message with the whole theme of self-sacrifice. Anderson's bisexuality no doubt added to the idea of forbidden romance, but boy is it interesting. Disney's interpretation changes it entirely. Ariel's longing for a world outside of her own, held back by an overbearing father.
You could have been seen by one of those barbarians, by one of those humans.
Daddy, they're not barbarians.
Is framed in a way which evokes themes of freedom and rebellion, which is ultimately rewarded in the end. She finds her happiness. She likes the prince, he likes her back. There's a little misunderstanding caused by a jealous sea witch, but it all works out in the end. She overcomes her obstacles through the power of love and friendship and all that, and gets married to the man. And all the world's problems are solved.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, of course not.
I mean, it's fine if that's who you are.
Absolutely.
There are things I like and don't like about both of these stories, but the big thing that stands out to me is how radically the rhetoric of both of these stories diverge, with a change of the ending. The old stories were tales of morality, definitely imbued with the biases of its author and the societies around them, but the intention was always to drive home a particular message. The brighter, Disneyfied versions not only sand down the rougher edges, but in the process often offer dramatically different messages. Disney himself believed that children were entitled to a magical view of the world. Disney wanted to create a world of dreams by his design. Stories of independence and all-American exceptionalism. Follow your dreams, kids! Though these dreams themselves all too often seemed curated. Princesses who, no matter their individual desires, must find themselves in the warm embrace of a man, living happily ever after in big castles. As a certain champagne man once said, if you want a happy ending, that depends, of course, on where you stop your story. I wonder how many people these tales of happily ever after, especially achieved through marriage,
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
have ruined.
Hey, Whirl, you better try some. It's a sin to waste your money. Great idea. I'll smoke the crack.
Nurse Jacqueline Payton is a superwoman. She's a married with children full-time nurse with a boyfriend. She's juggling a lot of things, but she somehow manages to be good at all of them. Her children and husband love her, so does her boyfriend. Her colleagues are kinda scared of her, but in a respectful, fear of God kind of way. The only problem is that she's a drug addict. Nurse Jackie is an underrated gem of anti-drug propaganda which tonally deceives its audience, luring them in with this goofy, colorful cast.
I like them quiet. Which I think is funny. I can tell you're somebody who, lives the job, and that's totally me. A quick question? Sure. Shut up.
Juicy melodrama and overall cozy atmosphere, only to choke, stifle, and drag them through hell, prying their eyes open to witness the most horrific train wreck that no matter how hard they try, they simply cannot turn away from. This may be because I went in completely blind, but I don't think I've had an experience quite like the one I did with this show. Jackie's a drug addict, this is established from the jump, but it's not that big of a deal. It's just one of her quirks. She's a nurse who does drugs. It's fine. The show starts out as a comedic, soapy little medical drama about these New York nurses and doctors doing their thing.
You are dodging the world's biggest bullet.
I am.
She wants to be a doctor's wife. Pretty much said it out loud.
You slept with her.
Yes, I did.
Jackie is obviously juggling a lot, but it's what's expected of any woman of that age in America. She has her job, she has her family. She also has a boyfriend. But it's fine, don't worry about it. We all need a little cope to go on living in the meaningless, soul-sucking drudge of our lives. Early Nurse Jackie, it was such an easy show to watch, it became a sort of comfort show for me, but like the most wicked of hard drugs, it was a lie. And the truth inevitably bubbled to the surface. The argument could be, and has been made, that stories should serve as a means of escape, a break from the cruelty of the world around us. This is a purpose that the American sitcom has served for decades.
I think I'll miss it because it's just a pastime. It's just become a habit.
The hypnotic haze of familiarity is the term I use to describe the function of the American sitcom in a video you can probably find if you look hard enough.
Let me
is it gonna be my turn, Jerry? When do I get my 15 minutes? I want my 15 minutes!
Oh, quit complaining. At least you have your health.
Health's not good enough.
The American sitcom born of the days of the Idiot Box has served primarily as a means of escapism for the traditional American family. They echo a certain model of normalcy and order, structured to soothe the mind.
What exactly are your degrees? Well, I have a BA from USC, a BS from UCLA, an MA from SMU, and a PhD from TCU. Well, I don't know anything about your education, but it sounds like a marvelous recipe for alphabet soup.
With familiar characters who occupy your living room after you return home from work. You take off your jacket and coat, eat the food your wife made you, enjoy the shenanigans of Lucy and her husband, the escapades of Jeannie and her master. Eventually you'd find more challenging sitcoms that try to add a bit of artistry and subversion to your living room conversation. The Doctors on MASH may have you questioning American imperialism and reflect on the cruelty of war.
War is the world's favorite spectator sport. War is war and hell is hell. And of the two, war is a lot worse. Who goes to hell? Sinner. Exactly. There are no innocent bystanders in hell. But war is chock full of them.
The Bunker family may casually bring up any and every hot-button political talking point under the sun.
Our world is coming crumbling down.
Nope.
Are coming.
12% of the population is black. There should be a lot of black families living out here.
But they are ultimately still a family.
If God had meant us to be together, he'd have put us together. He put you over in Africa, he put the rest of us in all the white countries.
Archie is the most cruel bigot ever put to screen, but you are still meant to laugh at him.
Well, you must have told him where we were, because somebody came and got it.
And in more tender moments, even sympathize with him.
My old man used to call people the same things as your old man, but I always knew he was wrong.
Father who made you wrong. A man who goes out and busts his butt to keep a roof over your head, that's the man that comes home bringing you candy. My father had a hand on him now. Busted that hand once, and he busted her on me. He shoved me in a closet for 7 hours to teach me to do good. Of course, he loved me.
He is, if just for 30 minutes, family, after all. It's entertainment meant to soothe the mind, echoing familiar words you've always heard. Narratives you know all too well, even if they aren't true.
I've been chasing it like a ghost ever since. And no matter how hard I try or how far I reach, I just can't get it. You want to go again?
Jackie's many lives were never going to coexist. The drugs, which were only meant to be a means of cope, of course, stifle and take over Jackie's life. In the absolute peak 4th season, Jackie finally starts to actively do something about her addiction because it's not looking good.
You gotta help me clean up.
Nope.
No?
I'll declare the body dead, I'll sign what I need to sign and be gone. Gone from this house, gone from your life. I am done cleaning up after you.
What was a relatively mundane comedy melodrama becomes a slow, depressing game of 1 step forward, 2 steps back as we watch this woman deal with an invisible enemy which actively starts to bleed into every crevice of her life.
So what do? I go to a church, I pick up a stranger, and I nearly f*** him to death.
He's not nearly dead. He's dead.
I nearly f***ed him, not he's nearly dead.
The show manipulates the audience into being her in that first half. But as it goes along, we are pushed further and further away.
Look, there's nothing left to wreck. But I can't stop. I can't stop, and I want to, and I don't, and I...
But we're hurt just by looking. The show creates a facade as Jackie does, lying to herself as well as those around her that she's okay, but the truth, the reality she tries to escape, always, inevitably comes to the surface. And perhaps because it was so suppressed, it is more mangled and grotesque than ever. I watched an interesting video essay recently by a creator called Hoots, and it was about Frasier, a show that I love, but she hated it.
I hate this show.
It's okay, because this show hates you.
I don't think I've seen Frasier, of all shows, get hate before, so this was interesting. I had to hear her out. I don't usually talk about other creators, so just know that when I talk about this video, it's because I think it's great. This was a brilliant video, because it made me feel bad. I have watched many great video essays, but rarely has one stuck with me like this one.
This is all my fault too! Shut up, Fraser! The only thing more hollow than your protest of innocence is your big fat head! I am wounded!
Frasier, like Seinfeld, is a 90s sitcom. It's one of the most successful spin-off series of its kind, a continuation of the equally iconic Cheers.
There is as little validity in a supposed death dream as there is in the cliched image of death itself as a grim, bloodless ghoul whose bony finger reaches out to tap you on the shoulder when your number's up.
Fraser, it's time to go.
It is the epitome of what I was talking about earlier before, in terms of the sitcom coziness. We watch the snobbish pseudo-psychologist Frasier Crane as he returns to his home in Seattle to take care of his father.
Well, the theory behind it is, if you've got really fine pieces of furniture, it doesn't matter if they match, they will go together. It's your money.
It's a delightful show to watch. The cast is small and easy to follow, the performances are great, especially the GOAT, David Hyde Pierce's Frasier's brother Niles.
Wow. Man, this is freaky. He looks just like you did when I met you. What happened, huh? Wasn't exactly a health club you were running there, Sam.
Hoots makes the argument that Frasier is a load of garbage because the show hates women.
We are invited into Frasier's upper middle class world, where the only conflict is whether or not Frasier can trick a pretty woman into bed.
I'm so sorry. Oh, good lord, no!
It's not serious. It's just Frasier.
I was initially confused because most of the criticisms that she makes,
And sometimes he even cares about the pretty lady du jour, when he isn't actively disdainful of her successful career writing benign, if a little specious, self-help books, or when he isn't violating her explicit boundaries in order to prove something to his family, or when his ego isn't called into question by the existence, autonomy, or lifestyle of the pretty lady du jour in any way.
could really be said of any 90s sitcom.
It was the 90s. It's not like the misogyny was mean-spirited, not like the old 50s black and white hit your wife misogyny.
Shut up! Oh, yeah, you want to punch in the mouth?
Frasier is even commonly seen as being one of the better ones.
We have this sense of naivete and innocence when we look back at the 90s. The 90s was a continuation of this capitalist creativity. It was young-blooded and influenced by the no-nonsense and disenfranchised attitudes of Generation X, who demanded, in their way, a bit of wokeness. But it also meant that, unlike the black and white hit-your-wife bigotry of previous generations, the 90s would forever be considered fine. And any questions around misogyny, homophobia, racism, ableism, fatphobia, or outright slander and ahistoricism, well, those accusations would remain, to this very day, the sole domain of the humorless killjoy.
All these things are true, but again, this was 90s television. Why pick on Frasier, of all things, to scrutinize?
You remember Martin spitting one-liners from a green beaten armchair. You remember Roz's barbed sarcasm. Can you remember the content of her witty rapport with Frasier in the KACL studio? No. But you can recall the flat musicality of Roz's dry delivery. You remember the dog.
Then it was about halfway through the video that I got my answer.
2 years before Frasier's premiere, and fully 10 years before The Harassment, George H.W. Bush nominated Justice Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court of the United States following Justice William Brennan's resignation. On October 6, 1991, a leaked FBI report was aired by NPR Supreme Court correspondent Nina Totenberg, alleging that Justice Thomas had made several unwelcome sexual comments toward a former colleague of his at the Department of Education and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. University of Oklahoma law professor Anita Hill was called to testify on the alleged instances of harassment in front of politicians and cameras again and again. The Democrats on the Judiciary Committee were wary of appearing partisan against the conservative Justice Thomas, so they came down hard on Hill during her testimony. Anita Hill was broadly mocked by media and pop culture.
You've shown remarkable courage throughout your testimony. It couldn't have been easy for you, or any of us, to sit here for the last 7 hours and talk about penis size.
The conversation shifts from Frasier individually to the culture around it.
When philosopher and Holocaust survivor Hannah Arendt referred to the banality of evil, she was using the example of the Holocaust, of Adolf Eichmann, and his fascinating, if disquieting, normalness. Arendt refers to the cogs in the machine of bureaucracy having a greater role in the acts of true human horror than have, say, psychology or sociology.
This is all my fault too! Shut up, Frasier!
Frasier is a classic sitcom, but maybe because of these things. This was the 90s. And truth be told, while we may all be aware of it now, we're in the woke generation and everything, right? This is still American entertainment. Othering people, centering yourself, being a scumbag, then having a good laugh about it. Why are we fine with that? Most of the media we consume every day that is cozy and massively supported, you can almost guarantee that someone working on it is.
Why don't we just call it Kelsey Grammer raped a 15-year-old girl in a hotel room in 1993 and a grand jury refused to indict because she waited a year to report? 2 months before Frasier premiered, and it still went on to run for 11 seasons, and he went on to become one of the highest paid television actors of all time. Ah, well, sad for her, but we wouldn't want a talented man's career to be ruined by the consequences of his own fucking actions. I don't want to remember the dog, Neil.
My first video to really take off was about Barbie. Up until my last video, which 3 of you watched, I would have considered that to be my peak. However, the ending of that video, while I've read a lot of comments talking about how beautiful it is, it's always haunted me. My video was a retrospective about the entire Barbie franchise and the fundamental dilemma that comes from trying to critique industries and systems which we benefit from. I'll spoil it here, but the sentiment that I ultimately conclude on is that when you're working within an industry and benefiting from it, your impact on the real world will be limited at best. But as Orson Welles would say,
go on singing.
Individually, nothing will happen. But maybe you'll inspire others, and with those others, collective action will be taken, prompting us to finally see a real impact. It's a sentiment I still agree with, but that video was made before the movie. And after the movie came out, and everyone and their mom voiced their thoughts and opinions, my video, which was ultimately very sympathetic towards bards, started keeping me up at night. The Barbie movie, like all Barbie media, is, in the end, corporate propaganda made to satisfy the needs of a company and sell products. No matter what ideas are presented in the picture, they will always be undermined by the end. It's a fun movie, it's an entertaining movie, that's the general consensus, but the ideas within it, people have had their thoughts and opinions. I'm definitely overthinking this, but since making that video, the world has grown darker, or at least its true villainy has only become more evident. I worry if my very sentimental ending may come across as suggesting that things as they are okay, or rather that enough is being done. My very hopeful ending, as the world's villainy continues to fester, I worry if I might have been too beautiful of an ending, bordering on irresponsible. Or worse, have I, for the sake of settling the unease in my own heart about what I do and whether or not it really means anything, undermined the potential for a harsh but sure ending, which might bring about a more effective change in the world I want to see. Neon Genesis Evangelion, since that very video, has been a looming presence on my channel, and the Eve analysis has been an inevitability. To do this franchise any true justice is impossible in this format, but here, at least, is the start of that conversation. Evangelion, like Seinfeld, is a massive series from the 90s, which is seen as a deconstruction and turning point of its medium. It is one of those rare titles which, even prior to the acceptance of Japanimation as something more than neckbeard fodder, has been seen as a legitimate work of art. But this does not mean that it isn't divisive. As praised as Evangelion is by people like me, it is just as reviled. From the outset, it sets out to be everything that a standard mecha action shonen battle anime series is not.
じゃあ僕がこれに乗ってさっきのと戦えっていうの？そうだ。やだよそんなの。
The very existence of the genre of mecha, like the Barbie movies, is built upon the sale of toys. But Hideaki Anno and the now defunct Studio Gainax were given freedom by the network. The protagonist is a depressed 14-year-old tasked with flying a big scary robot which may or may not actually be sentient. He doesn't want to, but his longing for the approval of his estranged father, who is in charge of the project, trumps any of his fears or sense of self-worth.
父さんは僕がやらんじゃなかったの？
必要だから呼んだまでだ。
The show starts out as a strange but straightforward mecha show. Shinji tries to run away a couple of times, but he always comes back to Papa. His fellow pilot may not actually be human. His fellow pilot, angry German girl with a fondness for Thursdays, is a textbook tsundere. All relatively run-of-the-mill stuff, but as the show goes along and these mentally unwell kids continue risking their lives for the approval of the grown-ups, it all sort of crumbles.
いつの間にかエヴァに乗ってる。乗せられてる。どうせ動きゃしないのに、このポンコツ。ポンコツは私の方か。
Piloting the robots canonically creates mental instability, and the show reflects this. Each character's quirky traits get stripped down and seriously examined, ultimately taking over the entire plot, perhaps reflecting how the characters themselves feel. I have always hated plot and loved characters, so when the show abandoned the whole robot thing and became an avant-garde exploration into their mental states, I loved that, I really did. Painful though. Each character's traumas take over, bleeding into the present, distorting how they view each other and themselves, maybe explaining their often erratic behavior. The original series ended with this complete abandonment of plot for the psychological showcase, but the fans didn't like that. Anno reportedly wasn't the healthiest mentally at the time either.
自分が作ったアニメは好きですか？
まあ好きといえば好きですけど、結構嫌いなところもあります。
嫌いなところはどんなところですか？
自分が出てるところ。
So he derailed the original planned conclusion to go in the avant-garde direction that he did. But eventually, they caved and gave us one of the greatest animated masterpieces of cinema, based on the original planned end of the series, though frankly, no less avant-garde, the end of Evangelion.
What the hell is even that?
There are many theories as to what my man's intentions were with this absolute beast of a film, but the interpretation that has always made the most sense to me was that this was a big middle finger to his audience, to the very industry he worked in, and quite possibly to himself.
I had said, it's funny, I guess I can talk about all this stuff now, but I wanted her to die. I really thought it was important. People would say, it's so nice to see a show about addicts. My brother was an addict, he overdosed a few years ago, whatever. That's more common than like, my sister's finally clean after a year, you know what I mean? So I said, I want it to be clear that this is not something that goes away, that all of a sudden she doesn't have to deal with this anymore. She's not going to meetings, whatever she might do to combat her addiction. It's got to be clear that that won't last. I think she should die, and we don't do that on television shows a lot. So that became the battle.
Personally, I'm not against recreational drug use. Despite coming from a country where, as far as the world is concerned, we're all pouring our 20s while drinking out of coconuts, I'm completely straight edge, possibly just because I haven't found the right dealers yet. But I really am just boring like that. The neurodivergence is responsible for all the fun that goes on in my head. I could do without the chronic anxiety and existential dread, but I have found a place to have that release, and you're witnessing it. In both creating and consuming art, I find that catharsis that keeps my mind at ease, or at least more at ease than otherwise. To just thug it through life can be a bit much. But swinging by the Cheers bar, hanging with Frasier and Niles, scamming people with Jerry and George, it's a nice escape. When I was 8, I ran around with Sonic. When I was 10, I found catharsis in the all-American success story of Walter Disney. When I was 12, having entered the strange world of high school, Naruto made me feel like I could do anything. Living through that ramen boy as he overcame all his obstacles and proved himself to the world gave me confidence at a time when I otherwise may have utterly crumbled. When I got a bit older, exiting the kid genius phase, entered the struggling artist phase, became Orson Welles. There were a few other people in between, but we needn't worry about that right now. Through these people, these characters, I won victories, overcame hurdles. For a second, this strange world started to make sense.
And it has to do with a kind of voyeurism, kind of, well, I don't know, I'd call it the emotional parasitism. But the whole mystique of the He-Man.
But when one holds a magnifying glass to scrutinize these people, the cracks showed. I am not gifted with special powers, nor was I born to a wealthy family. But still, to push myself to go further, I lived as though I was.
He's riding around, following a bullfighter, and living through him. His ego. You know, he's become that lovely young fellow in the beautiful costume, and that fellow's danger is his danger. That fellow's success is his, and so on.
It can be fun and romantic to live through these mythicized narratives, but reality always wins in the end. All the princesses and princes, good always naturally overcoming evil. Lovely things to believe in, but boy, these little girls are not princesses. These little boys will be fighting to slay dragons to become the mythicized great men in the old stories, only to grow and realize that they've hurt themselves, and quite possibly others, in their attempts to live up to an image. One which was never made for them. You see, when they say everybody dies, it's a bit of a joke. No sane story would end with the complete and utter annihilation of all of humanity. The end of Evangelion attacks its audience at every step. A lot of things are happening and it would be the most fruitless of efforts to make any attempt to explain the plot. But this film takes the story, the characters, everything we've built up so far and crushes it before our eyes. Shinji has spent this entire story running from his father, running from his own feelings, running whenever anything in his life gets too difficult, but now he can't. The world is falling apart around him. Shinji spends a good half of this film sulking and quite literally being dragged around like a doll. He listens to his music, escapes into his imaginary hiding place, but it is no use. In the end, he is forced to act. He is given the option to make of the world whatever he wants, but even in his choice, he runs from the reality around him, in favor of an end which leaves nothing left. Beyond death, beyond isolation, complete and utter primordial soup. Shinji refuses to engage with what is before him, and in the end, he, and indeed all of the world, pays for his selfishness.
So someone I once knew had this thing where he would constantly make misogynistic jokes and sexist comments, and at first I honestly laughed along, but then the jokes got a little excessive, and then the sincere asides started up about how women don't like short guys. And then one day he made a misogynistic comment about the body of an actress, kind of out of left field in a completely normal conversation we'd been having, and I just snapped. I really chewed him out. And you know what he said to me? If I had been a character in a TV show, that would have been really funny, though.
Jerry, George Lane, and Kramer aren't real, but the world, for a few moments, was able to escape into them. Whether it was their intention or not, they became the face of American television. American television is vain, arrogant, racist, fascist, and hates women. But it's fun. They repeat the same jokes, lulling the audience into a hypnotic state of conformity. All Jerry and Larry did was snap them out of it.
Guilty.
I thought them all winding up in jail seemed very appropriate and you know, right on target. As it's almost like, you know, the public forgot these are selfish, greedy people, you know, that have been doing all these things for years. And you know, I thought it tied everything up nicely.
If anyone deserved to go down into the slam, it was George, but we all went together.
I don't think this was necessarily any noble act on their part, knowing both comedians. They really did just think it was funny.
I began to hear from NBC strenuously about getting Jerry and Elaine together.
I was beating the drum saying their relationship, when they're together, I believe that is something that the audience can attach themselves to.
Teasing the audience by suggesting that there might possibly be something between Jerry and Elaine.
Jerry! I'm always...
Hey. We thought that people weren't going to believe that these two were just going to continue to hang out. We thought the idea of them just being friends was stretching credibility.
Despite the show going the distance to make their relationship platonic.
Elaine, what was it you were about to say to me on the plane when it was going down?
I've always loved you, United Airlines.
Was not necessarily some great feminist act. It was just kind of silly that literally every other show has some romance developed between the main male and female lead. I made a video about that. So it's really telling that one of people's main criticisms was that they didn't end up together.
I'm the most arrogant, self-centered son.
Shut your fat mouth. You know, I always wanted to pop you one.
You disgust me.
Are you as turned on as I am?
More.
What's the matter with you? Don't you two see that you're in love with each other?
That old model of story is so worn out, it's laughable. The old success stories of the lovable idiots who get whatever they want in the end because of meritocracy and opportunity and whatever. The story is beautiful, but it has to change. I originally watched Evangelion when I was 14, like Shinji, and saw myself in that character. Thankfully, I see less of myself in him now. I never bothered watching the Rebuild trilogy back then, though. I assumed it was just another cash grab reboot. Then when I rewatched the series some years ago, a friend told me to go and watch them, which I did. The long-awaited conclusion was actually set to release that very year. The Eva rebuilds were definitely made for money, let's not get it twisted, but they surprised me. They started out with that first one being the one-to-one remake that I expected. It's in the second, however, that the story starts to diverge and become its own thing. The third one being essentially a continuation of what is at this point an original story. I know it's divisive and Eva fans, like all anime fans, are the most obnoxious people on planet Earth when they encounter someone with a different opinion than them, but I like these. However, that long-awaited conclusion, which I hope is the final piece of Evangelion media, is what recontextualizes the entire franchise, and is, I think, the most perfect possible conclusion to this series. The decade they spent working on this epic paid off with some of the most staggeringly beautiful animation at a runtime, almost as long as my last video. It picks up exactly where the last one left off, with Shinji in despair after having destroyed the world not once but twice. Shinji, once again, spends the first portion of this film wallowing about, sorry for himself, trying to escape the world around him, but this persistent reality of ours refuses to leave him alone. Though unlike End of Eva, the world isn't falling apart. Instead, we focus on Not Rei, exploring this little village and being acquainted with the world for the first time. Growing to appreciate all the little things. Inevitably, the fun must stop and things are getting crazy again. Shinji, now having mustered up some life, is forced to interact with the world again. But this time it goes a bit differently than it did in End of Eva. Again, attempting to describe in concrete terms what the motherfuck is going on, plot-wise, would be an utterly fruitless effort. But Shinji is once again given an opportunity to redefine his world, And the twist was one which not one person who has suffered with the unapologetic angst of this series for the past almost 30 years could have seen coming. She does something right.
やってみるよ、綾波。ネオンジェネシス。
Shinji stops running. He confronts his past, his present, everyone who has added to his life, whose lives he's touched, and he sees it through. The agony of End of Eva is and has been only one possible reality, but it isn't the only one. Though ultimately, of course, none of this is real. None of these characters, no version of Shinji, no version of Asuka, no strange British manic pixie dream girl, none of this is true. And we, as the audience, are directly challenged to come to terms with that. Shinji's able to create an idealized reality simply because he actually chooses to engage with it. He thinks for himself, no longer running away from his problems, and rebuilds the reality that he has turned away from for so long. It is a happy ending, and it is beautiful. I'm not taking down the Barbie video or anything crazy like that. Like I said, I'm really overthinking it, but the point I've been trying to stress is that denial of reality's harshness can be dangerous. I saw a comment on my video about art, which I didn't screenshot, but it was something along the lines of, art is a part of life, but it should never be a substitute for life. I don't want to leave the essay on a very anti-art note, but the truth of it is that every work of art carries baggage, propaganda, and the mythology of those who create it. And often, what brings us the most comfort is the most detached from reality. We have to remember every now and then to step out, to challenge, and to subvert. And this may mean creating art that leaves the audience feeling bad. Perhaps so they can feel better in the long run. So yeah, all this really is just to say that Seinfeld's ending is great, you big media literate stupid.